Alright guys, so in the last video I showed you how to implement CSS in a few different ways, and the most common way is going to be by using an external style sheet like a style.css and then bringing it in using the link tag. But like I said, for the sandbox, for this section, I'm going to be using internal CSS and a style tag just so we have everything on one page, just for the sake of learning. Okay, so let's create a new file here. And we're going to call this 02 underscore selectors.html, because what I want to talk about is the different ways that we can select content to style or select elements or tags to style. So let's put in our boilerplate here with VS Code, and let's call this CSS selectors. And we're going to put in some style tags here. Okay, and then as far as the body, I'm going to just put in some simple HTML. We'll have a div, and inside this div, let's do an H2. We'll just say welcome, and paragraph, let's do lorem 20 tab, and then let's do another div, and we'll do another H2, and we'll say about, paragraph, lorem 20 tab. Okay, so let's save this and let's open it up with Live Server, if you're using Live Server. So we have two divs with a heading and a paragraph. Now, in the last video, we took an H2 and we gave it a color. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll say green. And if I save that, what happens is it's going to take every single H2 on the page and style it green. Now, there's going to be cases where you don't want every single element, whatever that element is, to be styled. You want to pick and choose what you want to style. Like, let's say we only want this first one to be green. In that case, we would use an ID or a class. So if I were to add ID green dash heading, I could go up here and I could add on to this H2 a number sign which represents an ID and then the name of the ID, and I could have called it absolutely anything. If I save that, notice only the first one is green, okay, because it's targeting this ID. Now this is actually optional. We don't have to put the actual element. However, if we keep it off like that, we could add this green heading ID to anything and it would be in effect. If I added it to a paragraph, it would turn the paragraph color green, although that wouldn't make much sense because we called it green heading. But for the most part, you're not going to see the actual element, at least in my experience. Now, remember what I said about classes and IDs. This is not really something I would put inside of an ID, because it doesn't really, for one thing, we might want to use this again. We might want another green heading somewhere. And IDs should be something that there's only one of. So I would actually change this to a class. And then to target a class, the styling is the same way. It's just this right here. Instead of a number sign, you want a dot. So if I save that, notice it's still green. Okay, so just remember, a number sign is for IDs. Dot is for classes, and I'm just going to comment this stuff out just so you have some reference, and I'll do an ID and I'll add that as well later on. So now what I want to do is talk a little bit about naming conventions. This is not really a good name because at any point we might want to change this to a different color like blue. Maybe it's a website for a company and they change their branding. So if I save that, it's now blue. In this heading, or I'm sorry, this title here, the class name makes no sense. So what I would do is I'd call this something like primary heading instead of green heading. Okay, that way it's just your primary color, your heading's primary color. You might even have a secondary heading class if you want a different color. And it doesn't have to just be color. You could change the font size, whatever it is that you want. But you want to think about your naming conventions, okay? And you want to think about the future. Could this change in the future? So calling it green heading is not really a good choice, even though it's going to work. It's not a smart choice semantically. All right, so now what I want to do is, let's add an ID to these divs. So we'll call this one welcome, and let's call this one about. Okay, so you see how this makes sense, because we're not going to have another welcome div or another about div. So an ID is a good choice for this. So if I wanted to, let's say give the welcome ID a background color, I could target it like this, right? And I'll say background or background color. And don't worry about any of these properties. I don't want you to focus on these because we're going to talk about all of these later. I want you to focus on the selectors. So I'm going to give this a background color of a hexadecimal value that's actually a light gray. So if I save that, notice that this only has that background color. So let me put a comment here and say the number sign is for IDs. Now, what if I want to have some styling, but I want it for both of these divs right here? Okay, so if we want to do that, we can use multiple selectors. So what I'll do is I'll take the welcome, okay, the div with the ID of welcome, put a comma, and then put the div with the ID of about, and then put my styling. So let's say I want to give them a border of 1 pixel solid. We'll do, I don't know, light gray. And I'm going to talk about these numbers probably in the next video or the one after that. And then I also want to add a little bit of padding and margin bottom of 5 pixels. All right, so I'm going to save that, and that style was now it was applied to both of these divs because I used multiple selectors, and I could add more if I want. It doesn't have to be IDs. I could put an H2, I could put a paragraph, I could put a class, whatever I want, and that would take on all of these styles in here. Okay, now let's say I wanted to target a specific, for instance, a specific paragraph inside of a specific div. Like, let's say the welcome paragraph, I want that font size to be bigger. What I could do is I could use a nested selector by saying ID welcome and then space paragraph. Okay, you don't want to do a comma. What that means is it means all the divs or all the elements with the ID of welcome in all paragraphs. You don't want that comma because we want to say inside the element of welcome, we want the paragraph inside of it. Okay, and then let's say font size, we'll do 20 pixels. By the way, 16 is the default, but I'll talk about pixels and all that in a little bit. So if I save that, notice that only the welcome div paragraph has the font size of 20. All right, so let's see what else. We can also style the body. So if we go up here, let's say body styling. So we'll take body, and body is usually where you put, like, if you want the whole website or the whole web page to have a background color, you could do that. I'm going to give it a hexadecimal of 333, which is a dark gray. So if I save that, you'll see it changes the whole body. Now the reason we can't read this right here is because by default the text is black. So what I'll do is I'll just target the about, okay, the div with about, and I'll change the color, which is the text color, to white so that we can see it. Okay, and I know this is pretty ugly looking, but I just want you to know the different types of ways to basically select and style different elements. Okay, so instead of body styling, I'm just going to say element selector. Okay, because we're grabbing the actual element or the actual tag. When I say element, I just mean tag. The body itself is the element. Div is the element, H2 is the element, with the angle brackets is a tag, so I use them interchangeably. Alright, so we have Elementor selectors. Let's just make this consistent here. Element selectors, dot is for classes, number is for IDs, We have multiple selectors by using a comma. We have nested selectors, so we can select stuff inside of other elements. And that's pretty much the basics. I mean, we have other things like pseudo selectors and stuff like that, but I'm not going to get into that now. I just want you to understand the fundamentals of selecting elements and being able to style them. All right, so that's it, guys. I will see you in the next video.